It's Wednesday, May 7th, 2025. Welcome to Make It Make Sense. I'm Grant Herms. Today on the show, Canada. Donald Trump sits down with the brand new Prime Minister of Canada to talk about the trade war, making Canada a state, which is not going to happen, and how Trump is impacting the rest of the world right now. But before we get to that, make sure you're subscribed and following this podcast on whatever podcast app you use. Like and subscribe on YouTube, and you can subscribe to the Make It Make Sense Substack for bonus content all week long. And also, I think I'm going to start shortening the episodes a little bit. They've been getting a little long and away a little bit from what I wanted Make It Make Sense to be, so you'll notice this week and Friday's episode will be just a little bit shorter. Okay, with that out of the way, let's get to our main topic, Mr. Carney's Oval Office circus. So yesterday, President Trump met with the newly elected Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney. Now, Carney is a member of the Liberal Party in Canada, the same one that former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was a member of. And originally, he wasn't favored to win the election in Canada. At the outset, it looked like Canadians were going to swing away from their former party, the way that Americans did and a lot of other countries did after the pandemic, swinging much further to the right or to the more conservative. But that didn't happen, and I'll explain why in a little bit. Now, Carney was also the central banker for Canada in the late 2000s and the central banker for the UK after the major upheaval of Brexit, which was Britain leaving the EU in 2016, and then through the pandemic. The job of central banker is a lot like the chair of the Federal Reserve here in the US. You don't need to know all the details of what they do. Just know that they control the money policy most of the time in those countries. But the details that you should know about Carney is that he was the first non-British person to be the central banker of England since it was founded in the 1600s. He was globally respected for the way that he did that job, and he's a money guy, so he speaks Trump. Now, they have not always had a cozy relationship. They certainly don't really have one now. And especially during Carney's campaign, that was made clear, which it was happening while Trump was putting the tariffs on Canadian business and saying that Canada should be annexed and become part of America, and generally calling Canadians weak. Now, Carney's campaign was largely built around pushing back against Trump, and at one point called Trump the Harry Potter stand-in for Hitler villain Lord Voldemort, saying, when you think about what's at stake in these ridiculous, insulting comments of the president, he means Trump, of what we could be, I view this as sort of Voldemort comments. Now, that was pretty tame sounding, but also got to remember he's Canadian, so that's as pretty harsh as it gets there. So when they met in the Oval Office this week, there was also this air of what was going to happen. Trump has not had a state visit like this with a less than friendly leader since he met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky back in February, where it was this big blow up in front of the cameras. So now whenever there's a visit sort of like this, people are on pins and needles about whether Trump or maybe one of the members of his cabinet, because last time it was J.D. Vance who antagonized Zelensky, what they're going to do during these meetings, especially in front of the cameras. But these two in the Oval Office were more or less cordial and certainly more than expected given the state of the tariffs and the trade war. Now, part of that is, Canadian politeness, but also part of it is Trump's poll numbers have been sinking, and he needs to play nice. Now, the two spoke about the special relationship that U.S. and Canada have with one another, both because they're neighbors and share a border, but also because of the vast amount of business that we do across that border. Canada is the United States' second largest trading partner, and most of the most populated areas in the country, especially on the East Coast, get a lot of their energy from Canada. But that wasn't what was first on the table. One of the first questions that Trump was asked was about insulting Canadians by saying that Canada should become the 51st state. And here's his answer to that question. And I've edited some of it out because Trump was really rambling during this meeting.
It would be a massive tax cut for the Canadian citizens. You get free military, you get tremendous medical cares and other things. Advantages, but it would be a massive tax cut. And it's also a beautiful, as a real estate developer, I'm a real estate developer at heart. When you get rid of that artificially drawn line, somebody drew that line many years ago with like a ruler, just a straight line right across the top of the country. When you look at that beautiful formation when it's together, I'm a very artistic person, but when I looked at that beauty, I said, that's the way it was meant to be. It would really be a wonderful marriage because it's two places that get along very well. They like each other a lot.
Well, if I may, as you know from real estate, there are some places that are never for sale.
It's true.
We're sitting in one right now, Buckingham Palace, that you visited as well. And having met with the owners of Canada over the course of the campaign last several months, it's not for sale, won't be for sale ever. But
Okay, the artificial line that Trump is talking about is obviously the U.S. border with Canada. Now, that is how dictators like Russia's Vladimir Putin talk about Ukraine, or how China's Xi Jinping talks about the Chinese relationship to Taiwan. They don't recognize centuries of agreements made by their own country with these other countries and international law by claiming another country is somehow spiritually part of their country. And that's what Trump is saying here. Second, when Trump says it would be a tax cut for Canadians, he means they would pay less into government programs like healthcare, which is technically true. Canadians tend to pay a higher percentage of taxes than people in the U.S., but chief among those is healthcare, and the quality of healthcare in Canada ranks higher than in the U.S. when it comes to healthcare outcomes and access to getting care, and in the long run, it's actually cheaper in Canada. Now, last year, the Commonwealth Fund, an international healthcare nonprofit, found that the U.S. ranked last among the top 10 richest countries in the world in overall healthcare, access to healthcare, and healthcare outcomes. Canada came in 7th. And that same study also found that Canada spends just over 11% of its overall GDP on healthcare, while the U.S. spends more than 16%, meaning it would cost Canadians more to have healthcare in the U.S. to have worse healthcare. And while, yes, a recent poll found that 48% of Canadians say that they're unhappy with their current health system, way more people in the U.S. are unhappy with ours. A Gallup poll from last year found that just 44% of Americans said healthcare in this country was excellent or good, and just 28% said healthcare coverage was good or excellent, which is bad. So that's not going to be a really convincing argument for Canadians, the majority of which do not want to become the 51st state. That's according to a poll done back in January that found that 90% of Canadians don't want to become Americans, and a recent poll done just this week found that a majority of Canadians don't feel welcome in America right now, which certainly means they wouldn't want to become Americans. And that's why you got Carney in this exchange saying in the most Canadian nice way ever that Canada isn't for sale and won't ever be for sale. And that's something that he said before, and it's what helped him win his election. But Trump doubled down on this just a little bit later.
No, not at all. No, time will tell. It's only time. But I say never. I've had many things that were not doable, and they ended up being doable, and only doable in a very friendly way. But if it's to everybody's benefit, Canada loves us and we love Canada. That's, I think, the number one thing that's important. But we'll see. I mean, over time, we'll see what happens.
Okay, so if you're not watching this, Carney is doing a lot of work to stop himself from interrupting Trump or snapping at him. He's shifting back and forth in his chair. He's on the edge of his seat, literally. He's making these sort of uncomfortable faces. You can clearly see him looking at his staff who are behind the cameras, kind of behind the press where they usually stand for these things. There's a lot of body language going on there, and you can tell he is uncomfortable to upset. And that's where things got left when it came to that. And now the two were really there to talk about the trade war and Canadian tariffs. When he was asked if there was anything Carney could say at these meetings that would get Trump to lift the tariffs that day, Trump straight up said no. And then he was asked about the tariff deals. And just listen to this. And again, it's a little edited because he rambles.
It's very simple. So I wish they'd keep, stop asking how many deals are you signing this week? Because one day will come and we'll give you 100 deals. And they don't have to sign. All they have to do is say, we'll start sending our ships right now to pick up whatever we want or to bring whatever we want. It's very, very simple. And I think my people haven't made it clear. we will sign some deals. But much bigger than that is we're going to put down the price that people are going to have to pay to shop in the United States. Think of us as a super luxury store, a store that has the goods. You're going to come and you're going to pay a price, and we're going to give you a very good price. We're going to make very good deals, and in some cases we'll adjust. But that's where it is. And
that is the president of the United States who ran on the economy, saying he would like people to just stop asking about his signature economic policy that got him elected. It's so simple, he says. He could have 25 deals today, and one day it'll be 100 deals, but they won't be deals because we're just going to set the price, but also sometimes they will be deals, and we won't be setting the price, putting aside that Trump has a really, really rudimentary idea of how global trade works. This isn't great for him to say from the Oval Office. Trump's numbers right now are already way underwater when it comes to how people feel about the tariffs. Recent polls, like the new one from ABC and Ipsos, found that 64% of Americans disapproved of how Trump was handling the tariffs. A Fox News poll found 58% also disapproved. 66% of people in a new Gallup poll said they expected to pay more for things because of the tariffs. And 55% said they do not think Trump has a clear plan for tariffs and trade in a brand new CBS poll. Those aren't good numbers if you're the person running a trade war. So for Trump to say that he could make deals right now but isn't is a really weird way for him to respond to this. But you can also see throughout this entire interaction that he is being exceedingly nice in this meeting to Carney, more or less to the press, at least nicer than he normally is to the press. And that's because Trump's tariffs aren't just unpopular in the U.S., they're unpopular around the world, and it's boosting liberal leaders like Carney and people who would oppose Trump more forcefully. It's being called the Trump effect. A researcher with the Council on Foreign Relations found that elections flipped from conservative candidates to centrist and liberal candidates in places like Greenland, which Trump has said he wants to take over. The party that won there has a plan to become its own country and stop Trump from pressuring Denmark, which owns it now, to sell it. There's Carney in Canada, who won on a platform, like I said, of pushing back against Trump. And the new left-leaning Australian Prime Minister also just won on the basis of seeming sensible in the face of Trump's tariffs. There are also predictions that a turn against Trump and his tariffs might happen in Japan later this summer in their elections, in South Korea, whose conservative party is in shambles after their own Trump tried a 12-hour coup to stay in power and has been a longtime target of Trump's anger about global trade, and even in the Philippines, which could be among the hardest hit countries when it comes to the tariffs, despite having a close relationship with the U.S. for more than 100 years. It was a U.S. colony until 1946. So at the end of the day, the meeting with the Canadian Prime Minister was about more than just the relationship with our neighbor to the north. It gave us a window into how haphazard things really are in the White House when it comes to the tariffs, and that Trump is driving both himself and the U.S. away from our allies, forcing him to be in a weaker position when it comes to negotiating. So much for the art of the deal, I guess. Okay, that is it for today's episode. Please rate and review the show whenever podcast app you listen to this on. Like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications on YouTube so you make sure you're following there. Subscribe to the Make It Make Sense Substack. It's just $5 a month. And if you don't want to do that, you can always follow the show on social media. It's Mims Newspod. That's MIMS Newspod, all one word on every platform. I am at Grant Herms on X and Blue Sky, and at Grant Herms TV on everything else. Thank you so much for listening today. I'm Grant Herms, and I'll talk to you on Friday.